Chapter 26. No time to pack. Scally, scuffed up and dirty with a rotten banana peel stuck to his Joeylicious sweatshirt, schemed for an angle as he looked up at the front door of his parents' house. This would be a tough sell. His ability to talk himself into and out of trouble usually worked about half the time. Okay, a quarter of the time. Okay, hardly ever. But these current odds fell somewhere between hardly ever and never. His mother and father knew the tricks of his suspect trade as much as anyone. And living without him these past few weeks must have felt like a second honeymoon. Finally, the prodigal son shook off any misgivings and moseyed up the porch steps with a slight limp. He would return home on his own terms, the only terms he ever knew. He rapped on the door loud enough for half the neighborhood to hear, and his father soon answered. Understandably, the older Scally was not happy. This late-night visitor was not just visiting, and he knew it. Scally smiled devilishly, as if he had an offer for a struggling soul. "Hey, Pop, mind if I crash the night?" Mr. Scally's look of annoyance turned to disgust. "You're a mess." And maybe a few after that. Scally noticed the banana peel hanging off him and tossed it aside. It was clear the older Scally wasn't interested in the bartering terms his son was fishing for. "I believe we had an arrangement," he reminded him coldly. "What arrangement was that?" The blonde time bomb asked as innocently as a wolf, in wolf's clothing. "You not living here." Mr. Scally choked on his words as the stench of his son finally reached his nose. Taking a step back, he looked like he was about to gag. "What is that smell? Were you rolling around in garbage?" Apparently the banana peel wasn't an obvious enough clue. "Funny you should say that, but I am sober." Scally knew what his father wanted to hear. The overwhelming odor of dumpster remnants masked any possible whiff of alcohol. But Mr. Scally wasn't about to take his son at his word. He stepped forward, blocking the doorway. "Says who?" "Says me standing upright." Almost as an afterthought, he threw in something else he knew his father would want to hear. "And I have a job." "Yeah, in wrestling management." The emphasis on those last two words made it clear the older man was not sold on this news either. "I'm working for my old school now," Scally clarified, stepping up his game with, of all things, the truth. "Doing what?" Mr. Scally responded with equal but curious skepticism. "What's it to you?" Didn't his father know that short, direct answers meant that, at worst, he was only lying slightly? When he wanted to truly sell an invented story, he would always say far too much. Scally folded his arms as he watched the figure blocking the door analyze the data. "So can I come in or not?" he pressed. "I have a feeling I'm going to regret this." And with a heavy sigh, Mr. Scally stepped out of the way. "Oh, I think it's more than a feeling," Scally chuckled deviously as he slipped by his old man and stepped into his old home. Tonight, his visions of Washi and Sayo sugar plums would dance in his own childhood twin bed. Joey was spread out on his own childhood twin bed with his feet dangling in the air as he mindlessly surfed the internet. Still in his sweaty wrestling outfit, he suffered from post-match depression. It was one thing to lose, even for a good cause, but this week he lost everything. Including the sale of 2 Bring the Violence buttons, he made a lousy $48 before expenses. If he included his entire memorabilia table, minus the 2 buttons, as an expense, which he did, he was buried in red ink. And now he would have to wait another whole week to feel the adrenaline from the 10 escaped convicts that would most likely double as fans at the next Brawl event. Something on Joey's laptop caught his eye, and all those negative thoughts suddenly washed away. He bolted up, his eyes almost popping out of his head. He quickly reread, then reread the webpage to make sure he wasn't hallucinating. Holy crap! He stared at the advertisement for an upcoming Hulk Hogan autograph signing at the Hulkster's brand new beach shop in Tampa, Florida. When? Joey's fingers moved faster than his brain as he scrolled down for more details. The ad took him to a page with the information he needed, and the excitement was boiling over. That is, until he reread the date of the signing. Tomorrow! Damn! Scowling at the screen, he wasn't ready to give up so easily. He pulled up a calendar, a map, and a calculator. After quickly running the numbers, he clenched his fist in victory. "I can make it." Far more forcefully than necessary, he then slammed the laptop shut and grabbed some traveling items. "Ma," he called out to the other bedroom, "can I borrow the car to meet the Hulkster in Tampa, Florida?" As usual, her distant voice was full of skepticism. "I'll leave tonight to beat the traffic." Of course, his sketchy math hadn't considered tomorrow's traffic. At best, it was a 17-hour drive from Brooklyn to Tampa. What about Sunday Mass? Father Randazzo is reenacting the Sermon on the Mount in full garb tomorrow. This was the beginning of the argument Joey had expected from his mother, but something about that vexed him. With a wrinkled forehead, he looked at the wall her voice came from. Again? He knew the good priest was committed to his work, but where was he getting the scratch for all the wine and fishes? Didn't imaginary Ric Flair discuss this with him recently? "Just promise me the drunk isn't going with you," Mrs. Casada said, basically caving with one sticking point. Joey frowned. "Ma, he's my manager." "Not in my car he isn't," she yelled, putting her foot down. Joey thought about what had just transpired between him and his so-called manager, and realized there would still be lingering bad blood. He looked at the nearest clock, 11:30 p.m. Plus, even if he was allowed to pick up Scally, there wasn't enough time. If it was a choice between taking his friend, who had essentially stolen from him, or not leaving to meet his hero at all, Joey knew where his allegiance lied. 4.5 minutes later, still in his soiled wrestling outfit, Joey was on his way to Tampa, Florida. His mother's 2007 Honda Civic didn't have much head or leg room, or kick for that matter, but he would have taken a tricycle to meet the Golden Giant at the end of the Highway 95 rainbow. Unable to keep the excitement to himself, and ignoring all thoughts of misguided guilt, he called the one man who would understand his delirium fully, the same man he left behind. "Scal, you're never gonna believe it. I'm on my way to meet the Hulkster." On the other end of the line, Scally had already made himself comfortable in his parents' living room. Decked out in boxers along with his customary tank top wife beater, he was focused, not on Joey's extraordinary words, but on the toy Lego fort sitting on the coffee table in front of him. He was obviously still salty over a recent event. "I just took a 4-minute shower and still stink. That's the last time you throw me out with the trash." "Forget that. I just said, Joe, you're just having another episode. These wrestling heroes are all in your head." For all Scally knew, his friend was crying wolf. His condition was detrimental before, but crippling of late. "But this is different," Joey insisted. "One sec." Scally lowered his cell as a shadow moved over his fort. He looked up to find his stern father looking down at him. "Pop, can't you see I'm busy here? Your mother and I were talking. Good for you and Ma. Keep talking." Scally refocused on his friend's vivid imagination. "So, Joe, if you're going to live under this roof, you need to start paying rent," Mr. Scally persisted. That got his son's attention. "On my assistant gym teacher salary? I might as well have the school forward my checks right to you and Ma." Not a bad idea, actually. That would at least put a dent in his outstanding neighborhood bar tabs. "Son, listen, I'll tell you what, though." Scally pointed at the precarious fort that looked like a poor man's rendition of the picture on the Lego box. "I'm working on my architectural career. Once the big bucks start rolling in on this front, you and Ma will be sorted." It was too late in the evening for Mr. Scally to be dealing with his son now anyway. After a sigh, the shadow cleared. Scally paid little mind to his father's latest defeat, and again refocused. "Sorry, Joe." Joey cut ahead of a car in the fast lane. It wasn't moving all that slowly, he just had the Civic humming. "Listen, I'm meeting Hogan at his beach shop in Tampa. He's signing autographs there tomorrow afternoon." That already sounded more legitimate than Joey's usual ramblings. Scally could also hear the sounds of the road over the phone. He sprang up off the couch, certain his friend was heading his way. "What? No way." He was halfway to the stairs in a nanosecond. "I'll be ready in 5. Instead of offering his manager a soft landing, Joey just tore off the Band-Aid. "Sorry, Scal, no time. If I drive through the night doing 90, I just might make it." Scally stopped dead in his tracks. Blinking uncontrollably, he couldn't believe what he just heard. "So why are you calling me then? For moral support?" Realizing the call was a mistake, it was the best Joey could muster. "Tease!" Without warning, Scally hung up on his so-called friend and stormed off to his room. It was either that or back to the Lego fort, with the threat of his father restarting the rent conversation. Maybe he would at least find solace with Washi and Seo waiting for him in his dreams. Joey looked at his cell as if that couldn't have been helped. Shaking it off, he remembered that he had everything he needed and smiled. He popped the CD of the Rocky III soundtrack into the car stereo and rocked out to What Else But Eye of the Tiger by Survivor. Life was good for the Italian dream, and it was about to get better.
"Yeah, that's what I'm talking about, brother."
A second voice suddenly echoed through the vehicle, much to Joey's delight.
"My film debut."
Sitting shotgun was the man, the myth and legend the struggling wrestler was actually on his way to see in the flesh, Hulk Hogan. Joey turned the music down a hair.
Although I did toss Stallone around the ring like a little bitch in my scene,
the blonde giant continued. Hulkster, it was a draw, Joey countered. He was never shy to correct his heroes, even when his heroes didn't need correcting.
Are you kidding me? That was some Hollywood BS if there ever was.
Thankfully for Joey, Hogan was more amused than angry at his risky reminder. Dramatic license, Joey said. Each attempted correction was like another toe being dipped into the pool of danger.
Thunderlips does not fit into the jurisdiction of dramatic license. I was the ultimate male against the ultimate meatball.
Not even Joey could argue with that. And he didn't. At least you were both ultimate, he said, finally pointing out a positive. Hogan conceded with a half-hearted shrug.
Good song, though.
He cranked the stereo to the max, and the pair sang along gleefully for the next few miles. Chapter 27. Enter Sandman. 5 hours later, with the thrill of Joey and Hogan's Eye of the Tiger duet long in the rearview mirror, undeniable sleep was elbowing its way into the still-moving car. Joey hadn't pulled an all-nighter since he got his gym teaching job, and the furthest he had ever driven from Brooklyn was to New Jersey. WrestleMania 29 was at MetLife Stadium back in 2013, and he and Scally had managed to score tickets to see John Cena defeat The Rock for the title. His mother had allowed his best friend and manager to ride along in the Civic then, but predictably, there were bumps in the road. The biggest coming when Scally threw his beer at a limo that tried to pass them in a gridlock. Incredibly, Judge Ito from the infamous O.J. Simpson trial was a passenger in the limo. When the beer smashed against his window, he rolled it down and berated the two Brooklynites, threatening them both with jail. If the traffic hadn't loosened up, and the celebrity judge hadn't been a wrestling fan, they probably would have spent that night in the clink. And now, the mere memory of that was about to carry the Italian dream off to a deep sleep. He shook it off with a wide yawn and rubbed his teary eyes. The sound of snoring drew Joey's attention to the passenger riding shotgun, and he gave his hero a disapproving look. Hulk Hogan was failing to help his Predagi complete his trip to see, well, Hulk Hogan. It suddenly dawned on the Predagi that if the Hulkster was asleep, he could at least make a more personal call. Quietly, he did just that. In her bedroom, Anne-Marie was jolted awake by the sound of her cell vibrating on her nightstand. Initially, she tried to hit the snooze button on her alarm clock before realizing it was her phone making the silent racket. Rubbing her eyes, she verified the time. It was 4:34 a.m. Flopping back down in bed, she put the cell to her ear. "Whoever this is, unless someone died, you are about to," she said with her eyes closed. Joey kicked off the conversation by missing the tee by 1.5 feet. "Anne-Marie, did I wake you?" That answered that question. Anne-Marie only knew one person who could be so oblivious. "No, Joey, I've been up milking the cows for at least an hour," she responded in kind. "How did you get this number?" Joey read sarcasm, like a blind bulldog reads Braille. "You're in the book. Didn't you get the Elizabeth doll I left on your porch?" I knocked a few dozen times, but no one answered. "Right, the doll for Veronica." Her eyes drifted to the female wrestling doll still in the box, sitting on her dresser. It was a neat gift, even though her precocious daughter cared little for dolls and less for wrestling. As annoyed as she was by the early wake-up call, Anne-Marie couldn't help but smile at her childhood sweetheart's kind gesture. "That was very nice of you. Is that your daughter's name? She must be a princess." He was sucking up to his old flame, of course. But what choice did he have at 4:34 a.m.? "Yes, Veronica, and she is." Her smile faded as sleep tried to pull her back in. "Listen, Joey, it's 4:30 in the morning. Can we—" "I know, I'm sorry," Joey said, practically completing Anne-Marie's sentence for her. There was actual sincerity in his voice. "I just needed someone to help me stay awake while I drove. And you were the first person I thought of." Staring up at the ceiling, his long-ago ex started to soften. "Where are you going in the middle of the night?" "I have to make it to Tampa by the afternoon to see the Hulkster." As much as he wanted to, there was no way to say that calmly. Briefly forgetting that she completed grammar school long ago, Anne-Marie suddenly shot up in bed. "Hulk Hogan? He was always your favorite. I can't believe you haven't changed at all since the 8th grade. You know me! I've had the same haircut since before then even. Well, at least he added the blonde highlights." When I find something I like, I stick with it. A sense of nostalgia washed over Anne-Marie as she thought of Joey as a kid. For all his faults, he always had a big heart. It's nice to see that when Joey loves something, he loves it forever. She didn't realize the gravity of her response until she said it. Joey's follow-up should have been a layup. Exactly, like my ma and the Hulkster. It wasn't. Again, her smile faded. Oh, I was thinking. Never mind. Yanked back into the present, something else struck her curiosity. Wait, are you driving to Florida all through the night by yourself? Joey's eyes moved to his traveling companion. Not exactly. My shotgun is currently out cold, snoring up a storm. Anne-Marie nodded, knowing exactly what he meant, or at least she thought she did. Scally could always fall asleep anywhere. I don't hear him snoring, though. Joey immediately realized his slip of the tongue. No, not Scal. His brain scrambled to catch up. If he mentioned the Hulkster was with him on his way to meet the Hulkster, the future Mrs. Casada would immediately hang up and seek witness protection. Thankfully, he recovered just in time. Yeah, Scal's the worst. Remember the time he fell asleep in Miss Whalen's class and had a wet dream? Anne-Marie laughed. How could I forget? He told everyone he dropped Elmer's glue on his lap. So gross. Joey sighed with relief. We really had some fun times back then, didn't we? Hey, let me take you and Veronica out for ice cream when I get back. When Anne-Marie didn't respond right away, he was suddenly concerned again. Was she really going to turn him down? Or had she fallen asleep again? Hello? Anne-Marie, are you still there? She pursed her lips and looked out the window. Okay, Joey. Why not? That should be fun. Just call me first, okay? Joey was ecstatic. I'm calling you now, he said, letting his mouth get ahead of his brain again. I mean, when you get back, call me then. Was she already having second thoughts? Okay, great. Same number? And would that give her third thoughts? Anne-Marie just hung up and was fast asleep before her head hit the pillow. Whether or not she heard Joey's final stroke of genius was anyone's guess. The Casanova in the Civic was left perplexed. Anne-Marie? He looked at his cell. Realizing she must have hung up, he grinned, refusing to take that as a bad sign. I guess it's a date then. Now he had something else to look forward to. Was this the rollicking beginning to the greatest day of Joey's life? Sweet. He certainly thought so. But with the sun up just a few hours later, the end of Joey's greatest day, and of his life, was suddenly a real possibility. He was fast asleep in the driver's seat with his foot still pressed firmly on the gas. He and Hogan snored together like a musical counterpoint straight from the unreleased archives of Johann Sebastian Bach. They drifted over to the side of the highway, the ride becoming much bumpier as the Civic began to scrape the shoulder. Hogan stirred first, his drowsiness quickly giving way to the realization of the danger at play.
Wake up!
He screamed directly into Joey's ear. If that had come from the real Hulkster, Joey would have woken with tinnitus. Instead, he just woke. Somehow. Hogan grabbed the wheel and steadied the Civic a split second from total disaster. Crisis averted, the blonde giant then glared at the unintentional Italian kamikaze. Playing the incident off as no big deal, Joey tried to clear his throat. Did you sleep well? But his voice betrayed him. He sounded like a female hyena in heat. As if by magic, Hogan did an emotional 180 and shrugged casually.
Not bad, actually. You?
Well, before Joey could finish his thought, Hogan grabbed the back of his head and slammed it against the steering wheel. Joey sat up and tried to regain his bearings.
Now pull over,
his wrestling mentor ordered.
You're getting some coffee.
Breakfast too? Joey hadn't planned on eating anything during the trip, except for the half-melted Zagnut bar he packed in haste. Hogan did the math.
Why not? I don't usually show up at my signings till 3.
Chapter 28. The Vegan Who Wasn't There. Scally stood at the refreshment table of his next sex addiction meeting, scarfing down a plate of donuts. He had hoped to pick up where he left off with Washi and Sayo, but his hopes were soon to be dashed when the all-business counselor was the next to arrive. Good morning, Scally. Hey, buddy. What's shakin'? Scally asked as much as stated before shoveling in another donut. We should talk, the counselor said, cutting right to the chase. His tone was ominous. When don't we? That's why I'm here. Scally was too busy deciding which donut he would devour next to pick up on any negative vibes. There's been some complaints by other members of the group, the counselor continued. What kind of complaints? The hungry imp was still hardly interested. Two kinds, actually. Well, one kind by two members. Scally gave the donut he was currently destroying a guilty look before finally turning his full attention to the counselor. Is this about me taking too many donuts? No, although that has been brought up by other members, just not the two we're currently discussing. This was true. In fact, one angry sex addict, who often baked for the group, had to be restrained at the previous meeting when Scally snuck out early with an entire batch of vanilla-frosted cupcakes. So spit it out. The sexual healing is about to begin. With that, the scrawny blonde with the sweet tooth polished off yet another tasty treat. That's just it. There won't be any more of that for you here, the counselor stated plainly, fed up with the one-man donut eating contest. At least not the sexual healing you're supposed to be getting. We took a group vote. You've been exiled. Scally was shocked and appalled, even if it wasn't in that order. But before he could muster a flimsy defense, his two angels of the Orient walked in. They both noticed the rapid-firing sex machine immediately, and then turned away from him in shame. Scally read his final verdict in large, bold print. With nothing left to say, he snatched one last glazed donut and stormed out of the room. He knew where he wasn't wanted, which was pretty much everywhere, but this time he had his principles. Scally, wait up, Seo called out just as he was exiting the facility. He stopped and turned, reluctantly giving the Asian addicts time to catch up. Seo's guilt was written all over her face. We're sorry we got you thrown out. It's just that. We're sexually frustrated, Washi cut in less apologetically, and have been ever since we broke up with our boyfriend, Seo added with a nod. Scally looked between the two beautiful enigmas with a furrowed brow. Our boyfriend? I mean, your boyfriend? Both of you? Seo smiled sensually. We like to share. Just not with a psycho samurai stalker like our exes, Washi elaborated. Clearly, the conversation had taken an unexpected turn. But was it for the better or worse? The cautious blonde still wasn't sold either way. Samurai? As in the sword? Sayo looked to her friend. That's why we couldn't take you to our place. He's always watching us there. So when you got us all worked up, Washi continued, and things didn't work out at your roommate's mother's apartment, Sayo added. We lashed out, Washi concluded. Sword-wielding X in the picture or not, Scally nodded understandingly. Oh, I see. Sayo touched his arm. But we want to make it up to you. Washi seconded the motion by touching his other arm. Yeah, Scally, I can't believe I'm saying this, but could you ever forgive us? Scally's insides were about to burst. I don't know. What kind of penance did you have in mind? He asked with a squeak in his voice. Both women gave him a devious smile. Sitting in the booth of a truck stop diner, Joey savored every aroma that emanated from the French toast and bacon in front of him. Hulk Hogan sat across the table with an omelet and hash browns. He savored neither. Both men also had a cup of coffee to go with their food. As Joey dug in with the fervor of a buffalo bison, the Hulkster just sat there stoically, his breakfast and coffee untouched.
Brother, why did you order this for me?
Hogan asked, truly perplexed. It would be rude of me to eat alone, wouldn't it? Joey said matter-of-factly.
You should be on a strict budget for this trip.
Between this and his Rite Aid hair dye comments, maybe the wrestling legend really was an accountant on the side. I have some cash left, Joey responded with a mouthful, reassuring his mentor. Hogan, much like Mrs. Casada, gave the Italian daydream a concerned look.
You do realize I'm not really here, right?
I know that, Joey muttered into his plate, lacking conviction.
On top of which, I'm a vegan now, so I couldn't eat this anyway.
Joey stopped chewing. This was news to him. Being from South Brooklyn, he couldn't exactly relate. But he could criticize that puzzling statement constructively. Hulkster, there's no meat in that.
An omelet is dairy,
the healthy blonde giant replied, annoyed that he had to point that out.
Plus, there's cheese in it.
I have no idea what you're saying to me right now. Having slept through most of the 21st century, Joey clearly mistook vegan for just a muscular vegetarian.
Never mind.
Hogan could only shake his head as the waitress arrived with a kind smile. Is everything all right over here? Yeah, we're fine. Joey forgot that there was no we in a man eating alone at a truck stop diner. The waitress's smile wavered as she looked over at the untouched omelet sitting on the empty side of the table. Expecting someone? She asked, reaching for the most likely explanation. Joey looked up at her with a wrinkled forehead, then at Hogan's food with an equally wrinkled forehead, then back at her, forehead unchanged. No, why do you ask? Not the explanation she had hoped for, so the waitress opened door number 2. Would you like me to wrap the omelet? What's with all the questions? I just told you everything is fine. He took a swig of coffee. Surely the prying intruder would be gone by the time the cup left his lips. Still unclear as to what was actually happening, the waitress decided that she wasn't paid enough to figure it out. She left the hungry man with the black wrestling singlet and red boa to himself. Hogan watched her leave.
Brother, she's just doing her job. She probably thinks you're talking to a ghost.
But you're not a ghost. The real you is still alive. Joey had clearly thought this through.
Have you ever imagined a dead wrestling legend?
Hogan asked curiously. Not that I recall. Joey was just as curious.
I wonder if that would be considered a ghost if you did.
The rippling figment of Joey's imagination was doing a deep dive into his own imagination. The mind boggled. Wait, I did actually, the hallucinating Italian suddenly remembering. Piper! Hogan couldn't help but roll his eyes.
Oh, that bastard.
Joey took immediate offense. Hey, respect. The Hulkster didn't feel the need to apologize.
I respected the man, but he was a nemesis, so he's still a bastard. I'm sure he calls me much worse from wherever he is now.
Joey couldn't find fault in that logic. Interesting point. Then he did a deep dive into his own imagination, which was also Hogan's imagination, or Hogan's was his. Is anyone still following this? Do you think the real you knows this conversation is actually happening?
No.
There was no hesitation in Hogan's response. Joey wasn't satisfied. No, you're not sure, or no, you don't think the real you knows?
The latter.
Hogan clarified. Joey frowned at the tattered remains of his French toast. How can you be so sure?
Because the real me has a life.
His hero responded. Maybe that was cruel, but it was definitely hilarious. Chapter 29. 100 Miles to Hulkster Heaven. Scally returned to his parents' house at around noon and found it as quiet as a mime's funeral. This was a good sign. If his parents were gone, round 2 with Washi and Sayo would end in a knockout, or a standing 8 count, or a TKO, or a decision in his favor, or a disqualification in his favor, or a draw. He wasn't picky. Bottom line, it would be a mind, body, and spirit-altering experience on the plus side. At that moment, Scally thought of his mother and felt soiled somehow. Where the heck had she been? He hadn't seen her since he moved back in straight from the dumpster. His father had that 1,000-yard stare of a hitman of late. Did he murder his mother after he was exiled to the Casadas and bury her in the wall? Or was his mother just out shopping? Who could tell? Feeling the urge to wet his whistle, Scally strolled into the kitchen and found his father sitting alone in silence, staring into nothingness. It was like he was suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic Scally disorder. "What's eating you, Pop?" he asked, barely concerned. Mr. Scally just looked over and glared at nature's mistake as his son grabbed a carton of orange juice from the refrigerator. "And I'm not just saying that 'cause we're in the kitchen," the blonde Tasmanian devil added just before taking a swig of vitamin C straight from the container. That got his father to snap out of his funk. "Get a glass, will you? It's all going down to the same place," Scally quipped. "I didn't even know you could drink juice without your body going into shock." All you readers out there were probably thinking the same thing. This was the first and last non-alcoholic beverage for Scally in the entire book. He even spiked his 1 glass of water. "I drink screwdrivers all the time." Hopefully that explained it. Mr. Scally could only shake his head in numb disappointment as his son put the juice back and plopped down at the table. "How come Mom never comes down? I haven't seen her since I've been back." Washi and Sayo's visit was fast approaching, so he needed to be certain that his old lady wouldn't suddenly re-emerge. "She's mourning the death of her son," his father said with a straight face. This made little sense to Scally, but he decided to play along. "What son? You mean I had a long-lost brother all this time? You! She's mourning you!" Mr. Scally suddenly shouted, a whisker from a complete psychotic break. "She has been since you started high school." Not the least bit fazed, the blonde troublemaker scoffed. "I finished high school in a year and a half." "High school finished with you? You barely passed your GED." Scally actually bribed the substitute teacher administering the GED exam with a case of imported beer in order to pass. I passed, didn't I? Finished with the hellish trip down memory lane, he knew it was time to deal with the business at hand. Listen, Pop, you need to get out more. Why don't you go catch a flick? My treat. With that, he placed a crisp $20 bill on the table. It's not like Mom is coming down to make lunch anytime soon. His father looked at the money suspiciously. Was it counterfeit? Would Scally yank back the bill just as he reached for it? Would it turn into dust later in his pocket just as he was stepping up to the ticket window? He quickly shook off each negative thought and rubbed his chin as he considered the offer. Scally knew that he had made a dent, but a dent wouldn't get his father out of the house. The new Jason Statham one just opened. You're a fan. You have the entire Transporter trilogy on Blu-ray. He is good, Mr. Scally concurred, his mind and hand drawing closer to the $20. I think you should go right now. Scally stuffed the tantalizing bill into his father's shirt pocket and escorted pulled him toward the living room door. This was definitely out of character, but the older Scally welcomed the sudden change in his son. He was clearly ready to give in. You think? Scally smiled deviously. I insist. Back on the road, now only 100 miles from Hulkster heaven, Joey's stamina was holding up. The hair-raising nap he took somewhere in the Carolinas really did pay dividends. He glanced at the gas gauge and smiled. With more than a half tank left, he was just going to make it. Probably. His mind started to drift. Beach shop, Hogan, beach shop, Hogan. He could practically taste victory. Imaginary Hogan, still sitting shotgun, seemed to be having the same happy thoughts. It took the ringing of a cell to bring Joey and the Hulkster back to the present. Joey's mood even dampened when he read the caller ID. Nothing against Father Randazzo, of course, but it was Sermon on the Mount Sunday, and he and the Civic were far, far away. Deciding to take his medicine, the Italian sinner answered the priest's call. Hi, Father. Sorry I missed your big day. Father Randazzo watched his parishioners leave as he stood in the back of St. Thomas Aquinas Church. His flock was waving their cheerful goodbyes, but the good priest was finding it difficult to reciprocate the notions. Even in his full Jesus costume, including a white robe, long brown hair, a beard, and blue contacts, Father Randazzo couldn't shake the disappointment regarding his one absent sheep. On Sermon on the Mount week, he hissed, immediately letting Joey have it. You promised me you'd start coming to Mass. He managed to fake a convincing smile as a male church member patted him on the back while passing. Good to see you, Jerry. I'm driving to Tampa, Joey explained. I thought my mom would have told you. You're talking to me while driving? The priest shouted, suddenly less careful with his volume. Put me on speaker. Well, I'm sort of with someone. Who? Scally? Father Randazzo tore off his Jesus wig. Again, Joey didn't want to explain. Seeing that his headset was in reach, he did his best to ignore the question as he leaned over the console. Actually, let me grab my headset. Hogan shifted his enormous rump as Joey pulled it out from underneath him. All right, Father, Joey continued, headset situated. So how'd it go? Father Randazzo frowned. Don't worry about how it went. Just show some support next time. I've been to your performances. I know, and I appreciate that. Joey wasn't placating the priest, he truly did. I have to go. These contacts are starting to dry out my eyes. But I'll see you next Sunday, right? Father Randazzo figured he'd close with a mild threat for dramatic effect. Absolutely, Joey promised before hanging up. Hogan gave a thoughtful look to the time just above the car stereo.
Lish, I'd step on the gas if I were you.
It's a Honda Civic. I take her any more above 70, she might come apart on the road. Joey wasn't kidding. Even at its current speed, the car sounded like a tin can traveling over an erupting volcano.
I'd probably arrive at my beach shop any minute now,
Hogan pressed, coyly urging his not-so-young prodigy on. Probably? Don't you even know what you're currently doing now? This seemed to be another one of those paradoxes. Hogan sighed.
How could I? I'm with you.
Man, the rules of my imaginary hero sightings really suck, Joey muttered.
All right, take it easy, brother. Focus on the road.
Joey simmered down. What damage could a few more miles per hour actually do? He gently increased his foot's pressure on the gas and left it at that. Satisfied, Hogan moved on to other matters.
So, what are you going to say to me at the signing?
Joey thought for a moment. I don't know. I've been in such a rush to get there and then dealing with you. I haven't even really had time to think. The Hulkster was shocked by the casual admittance of ill-preparedness.
You've been thinking of this upcoming moment your entire life.
I know. It's just...
Please don't tell me you're going to bring up the Sheik match or the Giant at WrestleMania 3.
Hogan was practically begging here. The derision in his mentor's voice surprised Joey. Why not? Those are two of your biggest triumphs.
Every fan brings that up.
The Hulkster gestured wildly as if to encourage Joey to dig deeper.
You need to stand out if you want to grab my attention and pull me into the world of Joeylicious.
Feeling that he understood where his number one hero was coming from, Joey racked his brain. What if I mentioned the Ultimate Warrior match? He said, finally coming up with a doozy. Hogan was flabbergasted and a little insulted.
When he pinned me for the belt at WrestleMania 6?
Joey nodded, clearly proud of himself. I would definitely stand out. How many fans of yours bring up defeats?
Standing out is one thing, but standing out in order to catch a beating is something else.
Hogan's warning was immediate, as if Joey's beating could come sooner rather than later, like in a moving Civic. Hulkster, that was an honorable defeat, and look at all the successes you've had since then, Joey persisted, wanting to win over the invisible legend with his point.
Yeah, and look at me now, sitting here with you.
Hogan replied, dripping with sarcasm. No, you're sitting at your beach shop in Tampa surrounded by hundreds of adoring fans, Joey retorted, doubling down. At that, Hogan couldn't help but smile. It was progress, at least.
All right, brother. You win,
he said, finally conceding the point. Chapter 30. Samurai Dwayne. Scally paced the living room nervously. His expected guests were unexpectedly late. He looked at the time in an effort to stop it, but that just increased his anxiety. He wouldn't get another chance like this for a while. The next Jason Statham movie wouldn't be out for at least a year, and his mother could be roaming the house freely again by then. Gritting his teeth, he began to think that this was all in his head. Washi and Seo didn't actually tell him they were coming over, he just imagined they did like Joey imagined his wrestlers. Maybe his best friend and only client's condition was contagious. But just when the rapid-firing sex machine was about to give up all hope, a knock at the front door startled him out of his stupor. Rushing over, he yanked the door open and found Washi and Seo standing on his parents' porch steps. He was relieved, excited, and annoyed all at the same time. You were supposed to be here over an hour ago. What happened? We couldn't shake our ex, Seo explained apologetically. Scally looked between them, around them, and behind them, half expecting a charging sword to be coming at him. Psycho Samurai? Washi sighed. Relax. We're here now, aren't we? Jumping out of the way, he ushered them into the house. Come in. My old man will be back from the movies soon. Statham flicks didn't usually run past 100 minutes. So even with the trailers, the sand in the hourglass was dwindling fast. The two women stopped to take in the decor of the place. This was definitely a step up in property value compared to the arena of their first aborted encounter. Seo was particularly impressed. Nice house. Are we going upstairs? Scally placed a hand on her back and steered her in the right direction. Not a chance, but there's a couch in the basement. Makes no difference to me where we do it, Washi said, chiming in with her usual whateverness. Then it's settled. He was already starting to undress. They made little noise as they hurried down the basement stairs. Joey was dripping wet in sweat. He was either incredibly pumped as he neared his destination, or the Florida heat was starting to get to him. The air condition on the Civic crapped out 5 years ago, and his mother never bothered to get it fixed. Regardless, he would soon be face to face with his hero, for real this time. He began to imagine how things would play out. Would Beach Shop Hogan be just as interested in helping him with his budding wrestling career as the Hogan sitting in the passenger seat was? It was easily the most exciting moment of his life. Joey's imagination began to go into overdrive when flashing lights caught his attention. His eyes darted to the rearview mirror, and the reflection was not a happy one. Would you believe this?
Ah, that's too bad. He got you on radar.
Damn it, Hulkster, pay attention to these things, I'm driving. He was too beside himself to realize that his imaginary being had its limits. Hogan saw no need to defend himself to his creator.
Just pull over. You can't outrun the cops in a Civic,
he responded calmly. After slamming on the steering wheel, Joey accepted his misfortune. It was simply a price to pay. Meeting his idol was more than worth a speeding ticket. The police car pulled up behind him. Joey looked over at the legend sitting next to him. Maybe there was still a way out of this. So you'll do the talking? Use your celebrity on him?
Brother, I'm not really here. How many times do we have to go over this?
Hogan was about ready to exit the car and walk the rest of the way to the beach shop. Ugh, I keep forgetting. This was followed by another slam on the steering wheel by the frustrated Italian. A knock on the window forced Joey to get a hold of himself. He rolled down the glass partition and smiled. Yes. Hi, officer. License and registration? The no-nonsense cop nodded. Hulkster, can you reach into the glove? For a second, Joey forgot again. Hogan's expressionless face was all he needed to hear. Yeah, I know. Joey laughed awkwardly as he looked back at the cop in an effort to play that off. Then he leaned over and opened the glove compartment all by his lonesome. Mr. Scally returned from the movies feeling much better about things. Once again, Jason Statham had helped the sun shine through the thick clouds of a stormy day. Honey, I'm home, he called up to his wife. There was no immediate answer, so he upped his sales pitch. Are you sure you don't want to come down? Our dead son isn't around. Again, no response, but he shrugged it off. Nothing was going to ruin this day. His son had even been respectful. That alone was something to celebrate. He strolled over to the living room stereo and threw on some smooth jazz. The older Scally always wanted to play like Kenny G, but didn't have the lips, ears, or musical aptitude to even scratch the surface. To put it kindly, he was talentless, but as he sat down on the couch and relaxed, he was fine with that. Nothing was going to ruin this day. A sudden rap at the front door immediately gave him second thoughts. Who would bother him on a Sunday afternoon? He definitely wasn't expecting anyone, so it had to be his son who forgot his key or something. Oh well. So much for the relaxation. His son did treat him to Statham, so he had no choice but to let him in. But when he opened the door, he was both perplexed and frightened at what he saw. Standing on the porch wasn't a scrawny, 5.5-foot-tall blonde Caucasian. It was a muscular, 6.5-foot-tall African-American with a samurai sword sheathed in a scabbard. Meet Samurai Dwayne. Survival instincts kicking in, Mr. Scally wisely backed away from the door as the intimidating warrior entered on his own accord. Where are they? The mysterious visitor's voice was just as scary as his physique, although a suspicion should have been forming in Mr. Scally's mind. He was too terrified to even imagine who or what Samurai Dwayne was referring to. Who? Where is who? The stranger unsheathed his sword. I'm not going to ask again, Mr. Scally panicked. It's 2020. We're in Brooklyn. Why do you have a sword? Samurai Dwayne's response was both simple and direct. He sliced the coffee table in half with his sword. That single act was all the confirmation the older Scally needed. He calmed, suddenly knowing he was off the hook. Oh, you must be looking for my son. Is that the blonde midget I recently spotted my girls with? The crazed swordsman asked, demanding more information. The one and only, Mr. Scally replied, neither demanding or even needing more information. The guilty party peeked out from behind a quivering basement door and was immediately spotted by the last person he wanted to be spotted by. Samurai Dwayne pointed his sword. You! Of course, he didn't wait for a response as he charged the basement, causing Scally to squeak and run back down the stairs. Mr. Scally immediately heard the sounds of two unknown women echoing his son's cries during the unseen but quite imaginable raucous. He momentarily considered running upstairs to rescue his wife, but then thought better of it and just darted out of the house. Jason Statham he was not. Seconds later, Scally, still in his tidy whities, scurried from the basement like a flesh-colored rat with a bloodthirsty Samurai Dwayne in hot pursuit. The blonde weasel dove for cover behind the couch just as the angry stalker about cut him in half, destroying the leather piece of furniture instead. A frantic Washi and Sayo emerged right behind the mayhem. They were also still in their underwear, so round two between them, and Scally obviously didn't get any further than round one. Still, they pleaded for their little man's life. Samurai Dwayne would hear none of it. He continued to attack Scally in the room with equal gusto. The scrawny blonde target miraculously ducked and weaved the razor-sharp sword, but he had nowhere to hide. I can see you're very talented, he shouted, trying his gift of gab on the vengeful ex. Maybe we can do business together. Scally dodged another blow but felt the wind from the blade as he lost a lock of hair. Chocolate Milkshake is a client of mine, he pleaded desperately. You may know him. Samurai Dwayne would not be bargained with. He was not interested in the suspect manager's contract unless it was signed in the suspect manager's blood. All of it. Realizing his diplomatic efforts were futile, Scally threw caution to the wind and sprinted for the door. He barely made it out alive, and the unrelenting swordsman stayed right on his coattails. Someone's cardio was about to be fully tested. Washi and Seo chased after their past and future lovers' big maybe, with their continued screams attracting most of the neighborhood and the next neighborhood over. Smooth jazz once again claimed the living room as the sounds of chaos faded down the streets of Brooklyn, New York. Chapter 31. Imposter? Arriving in Tampa, Joey screeched to a halt as he double-parked the Honda Civic right in front of Hulk Hogan's beat shop. Understandably, the area was bustling with activity much like Joey was. He jumped out of the car, tucked his speeding ticket under one of the wipers to confuse any snooping cops, and ran to his hero's autograph signing. He would have made it straight inside if it wasn't for the dinosaur-sized security guard who gave him the stop sign. Nice outfit. The security guard snickered without snickering. Joey, of course, was still dressed as Joeylicious. He even had the stink of Tiny Still on him, but the guard had his own hygiene issues to deal with. Thanks, I'm here to see the Hulkster. I'm his biggest fan. The Italian Brooklynite was already hyperventilating. The security guard scoffed. Yeah, so are they. His thumb pointed to the ridiculous long line of fans that started at the shop and ended at infinity. You gotta be kidding me, Joey protested. I'm not, and they aren't either. Again with the thumb, this time it was used to point the so-called superfan to the back of the line. Joey nodded, took a step toward infinity, but stopped. He fought in too many crappy elementary school gyms and drove way too far in an equally crappy car to wait any longer. There has to be some kind of arrangement we can work out. What'd you have in mind? Obviously, the guard was open to negotiations. He needed to splurge on deodorant just as badly as Joey. Joey thought of a reasonable price. I'm challenging Patty Shamrock for the belt next weekend. Brooklyn's really awesome wrestling league. Brawl? The security guard cut in with immediate recognition. Joey couldn't believe his luck. You heard of us? Again, the big man scoffed. No, I took the first letter of each word you just said and spelled it out. How does a pair of ringside seats sound? Whoever said Joey was easily deterred didn't know the meaning of the words easily or deterred, or they were legally insane. There are 11 Brooklyns in the U.S., none of them are in Florida. This was the guard's clever way of pointing to the back of the line again. What kind of silly talk is that, Mr. Brooklyn shot back. There's only one Brooklyn I know of, and that's the real one. Look it up. It's a fact. It actually is. I left my smartphone in the car, Joey retorted, but he still felt negotiations were heading in the right direction, somehow. Do we have a deal? No. The security guard finally put his negative stamp on the proceedings. Joey's shoulders slouched in defeat. What else did he have to offer? He couldn't exactly wash dishes in this place. Maybe he could sand down a few surfboards. But before he threw that piece of summer gold on the table, Hulk Hogan's longtime wrestling manager, the mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart, suddenly appeared. Sporting his customary shades, mustache, mullet, and megaphone, he looked like he was on his way to or from a 1980s title match. Wasting not a second, Jimmy dove headfirst into the negotiations.
Come on, baby. Guys like us don't wait in line.
Instantly recognizing that voice, Joey turned with excitement. Jimmy Hart, I knew you'd be here. You and the Hulkster have been buddies forever. It's an honor. He grabbed the legendary manager's hand and shook it vigorously for about a minute and a half. Jimmy didn't seem to mind. In fact, he appreciated the Italian dream's over-enthusiastic enthusiasm.
Honor's all mine, Licious. I've been following the indie scene for a while now, and I know all about you.
What? You've heard of me? I don't believe it. Joey could have left right then and there, and his trip would have already been a success. But he wouldn't do that, would he?
Yeah, baby. I'm always looking out for middle-aged talent like yourself to take under my wing and manage.
Scally was suddenly on thin ice. The mouth of the South wants to be my manager. This is the greatest day of my life. Scally then drowned in very cold water.
It's about to get better. But first, do you have any cash on you? I only roll debit.
This was lost on Joey at first. Jimmy pointed to the security guard as a reminder.
So we can grease this Neanderthal properly.
Joey started to nod. Oh, yeah, He reached into his singlet and pulled out a soiled bill. This is my last 50. I was saving for gas back home, but... The mouth wasn't interested in hedging explanations, so he just snatched Joey's nest egg from him.
Perfect!
He handed the money to the guard.
Come on, baby! The Hulk is about to come out. I'll introduce you.
Joey could barely breathe as he followed Jimmy into the beach shop. I think I'm gonna pass out. The place was packed to the gills with Hulk Hogan fans. Joey collected himself. Mouth, look at this crowd. Do you think it could be like this for me one day?
When I'm in your corner, every day is like this, baby!
What Jimmy lacked in modern fashion sense, he made up for in confidence. Joey's euphoria was interrupted when a random surfer dude smacked into him with his surfboard. Hey, watch it with that thing, Joey protested, rubbing his shoulder. The surfer turned unaware of his transgression. Whatever he was going to say quickly faded from memory as he took in Joey's outfit. Are you supposed to be a superhero or something? Or something, the proud indie wrestler responded curtly. The name's Joeylicious. Sounds like you're on the wrong end of a glory hole. In fairness to Joey, he came up with the name well before such pleasure constructs were invented, but he was insulted just the same. Why are you even here? It looks like you're just on your way to the beach. I am on my way to the beach, the surfer barked back. This is a beach shop, or perhaps you missed the sign. Joey latched onto that remark. This is the Hulkster's beach shop, he shouted, pointing out the missing detail. And don't you ever forget it, the surfer scoffed. Fair enough. But you want to know what I will forget? What? Joey wasn't really curious, but he was boxed into having to ask. You. And with that, the surfer turned and continued toward his usual habitat.
Kids these days, no respect.
Tell me about it, Mouth. Joey appreciated a manager who was fully on his side for once. He knew Scally's heart was in the right place, but his mouth and brain were somewhere south of wrong. The unpleasant interaction was quickly forgotten as the crowd began to perk up and clamor. Something was afoot, and Joey turned to see what it was. A familiar-looking figure with his arms raised in triumph stepped out from behind a beaded curtain near the signing table. The place went ballistic, but Joey could sense something was amiss. The cherished figure, although resembling Hulk Hogan, was a little too short, a bit too old, and clearly too out of shape to be the real deal. Beside him, Jimmy immediately mouthed Joey's inner suspicions.
What the hell is this? That's not the Hulk, baby!
Joey clenched his fists. I can't believe it. That's some stupid impersonator. Why are these morons cheering? He was already ready to punch someone.
Let's give him a piece of our mind. What do you say, Licious?
Absolutely, Mouth. I'm gonna lay into this fool. Again, this was the type of manager Joey always wanted and needed. With that, they pushed their way forward through the crowd until they were close enough to the signing table. Boo! Go home, you wannabe! Joey shouted over everyone. This got immediate attention from the fans. Shocked heads turned to the oncoming agitator, and some even cleared a path. Joey was dressed like a wrestler, so perhaps he was just part of the show. Joey took notice of the crowd noticing him. What, you want a piece of Joeylicious? The man of the hour, the tower of power, too sweet to be sour, the Italian dream.
That's a lot of nicknames, Lish.
Like a laser, Joey pointed at the fake wrestling legend now sitting at the table. Get that imposter out of here. Of course, this got the Mouth's full support.
You tell him!
When they reached the imposter, Joey glared down at him. The Hogan look-alike may have been concerned at the crazed wrestling fan before him, but he played it off with good humor.
Hey, brother. Nice boas. What can I sign for you?
Joey was insulted by the offer. Mouth, look at this fraud. His mustache isn't even real, without waiting for a response or an invitation. He reached out and tugged on the so-called facial hair. It was real, and the stunt turned the imposter's amused expression into one of surprised annoyance.
Okay, so anyone can grow a mustache,
Jimmy said, quick to dismiss the blonde whiskers. Recovering from the shock of the face yanking, the Hogan look-alike growled.
What the hell, brother? What's your problem?
Joey wasn't the least bit deterred. You're not a wrestler. You're just some fake. I'm a real wrestler. Mouth, watch this. He slapped the imposter hard across the face. The crowd gasped at the blatant disrespect for their hero. Oh, snap, several even shouted. But Joey was proud of his outrageous act. He was speaking for all wrestling fans from around the world, or at least the ones between Brooklyn and Tampa. He gave his would-be idol one final intimidating stare down. That's what you get for making me drive all the way from Brooklyn for a lame impersonator, he spat. Turning on his heels, he then motioned for Jimmy to join him. "Come on, Mouth, let's get out of here."
You said it, baby!
Like a proud papa, the Mouth of the South put his arm around his new client as they headed toward the exit. The Hogan look-alike stood up, only he didn't look much like an imposter anymore. This new and improved Hogan was suddenly taller, muscular, and angrier.
Hold on a second there, brother.
Joey froze halfway to the door. That voice sounded a little more familiar than before, and a lot more frightening. Relishing the upcoming event, the crowd parted like the Red Sea for their blonde giant without as much as a murmur. With the sound of menacing footsteps heading his way, Joey looked to his new manager for an explanation. "Mouth, what's up?" But Jimmy wasn't there. Knowing all too well what that meant by now, Joey gulped and nervously turned to face the music. And he knew the music would be loud. Standing directly over him was the legend he had idolized his entire wrestling life. This, of course, was the real Hulk Hogan after all. "Hulk?" Joey asked as much as pleaded. It was far too little, too late as the Hulkster let his fist respond. Joey took the punch square in the face, and immediately felt time slow to a crawl as he keeled over backwards. He lost consciousness before he hit the floor. The crowd erupted in cheers and applause. This was the kind of entertainment they had not expected, but certainly appreciated. Real Hogan looked down at the wannabe wrestler with disappointment.
What a jerk. And a shame, too. I really liked his look. Could have helped him become a superstar. Oh well.
With that, he headed back to the signing table, leaving Joey passed out on the floor.
Next!
The Hulkster called out to another round of cheers. The next person in line stepped over the motionless Joey and posed for a picture with their blonde hero. Joey slept through the rest of the event like a bloodless corpse left on the battlefield. At least he would be well rested for his long, painful ride home. If he could only find money for gas.